So Kerry, first of all, thanks for talking to me today and to the students at Waterloo. Can you begin just by telling the students about yourself and what your job is now and how your career led you to it?
Well, welcome and hello to the students that I won't be able to see. I have a kind of a mixed background. I did an MBA and worked as a teacher in Japan and worked for the European Foundation of Entrepreneurship Research and a number of nonprofits or governments making educational content. So I have a kind of a weird mix of business, educational, and making content. So Mars was a really neat place for me because that sort of all those things fit into my role here, which is Director of Entrepreneurship Education.
Thank you. And could you now tell us about Mars and what it does?
Well, Mars is actually a nonprofit innovation center which helps whose mission is to build the next generation of Canadian companies. So we work in 4 different sectors: life sciences and healthcare, clean tech, ICT, and social innovation. And we work with early stage entrepreneurs to help them build and grow their business. It's very similar to what Communitech does in Waterloo.
Thank you. So if there is an entrepreneur who has an idea for a new business, what's the process they would go through with Mars? Who would they approach and how would things work?
I think there's different levels of engagement that somebody could have with Mars. I think one of the first things they could do is maybe sign up for our e-newsletter to just check out what events are coming up, because there's always a way of building community here, because we've got a fairly big building and we have numerous events all the time in all the sectors that are trying to get entrepreneurs meeting each other and learning from other entrepreneurs. The next level of engagement is maybe education. So we have Entrepreneurship 101 that we're webcasting across the province. They're able to follow that and ask questions on the webcast. We also offer other educational resources like the Entrepreneur's Toolkit and workshops that we do at Mars, but also our workshops are sometimes delivered through Communitech as well. So there's the education piece, and then as they start to actually work on building their company, so that sort of in getting to education and when they actually start doing the work, there's the advisory services. And the advisory services helps match new or early stage entrepreneurs with mentors and advisors that can help them grow their business. They can also provide market intelligence, because we have a market intelligence team. And for the really high potential companies, there may be some funding opportunities, either through the government or the Investment Accelerator Fund that we have here.
Thank you. So could you tell us about some of the successes that Mars has had, people that have been through that process and are now running businesses?
I think one of our success stories that we like to tell is Mars is fairly young. We've been around 8 years. And when we first started having Entrepreneurship 101 about 5 years ago, one of the companies that came through that stream, so they were very early stage, and was in the Upstart competition, which is at the end. They won 2nd place. The company's name was Cognovision. And it took them a couple more years after they did Entrepreneurship 101, but they eventually did really well in their company, and it was bought for a large sum from Intel. And what's great about that is the founders work also closely with TIE, so they're also giving back to the community through their connections with Mars and TIE, the Indus Entrepreneurs Association. So that's the idea, is that we help entrepreneurs and build their business along with their other networks, and then they would give back and help new entrepreneurs as well.
Okay, thank you. So you're in charge of education services for Mars. Can you tell us a bit more about those?
Well, education is probably a bad word to use for entrepreneurs, because they are normally full of drive and don't like to be taught per se, but our education is more business advice and skills and tools. So when we like to talk about a very practical parts of education. So when I did my MBA, I learned a completely different sort of viewpoint about business and entrepreneurship that I'm learning working with entrepreneurs now. So very practical tools, short advice, like our workbooks, for example, are only 20 pages. So some of these how to do a business plan templates online were like 100 pages, and we said no entrepreneur is going to drag through all that. We want to make it simple and concise so they can actually use it and it saves them time.
And they're very good too. The students are going to be using those workbooks in their class.
Well, thanks. We use them all the time, so that's great. And we're refining them all the time, so let us know how they work.
We'll give you our feedback.
Yeah.
So could you tell us what you think the most important things for young entrepreneurs are to learn?
I wrote down 5 for this because this is a lot of these things I wish I would have learned, or they were telling me and I wasn't listening. I think the biggest thing that ever happened in my career was I had a fantastic boss at one point that became a mentor, and you'll know them when you find them. But they always say people leave jobs because of bad managers or bad bosses. So if you can find somebody to work for that can be a boss, a mentor as well as a boss, or find a mentor in your network, they have so much experience and they can really help you with the early days of whether it's building a business or working for a company. Always be building your network. I am an introvert and I studied during university and didn't go out, and that was a mistake. Build your network constantly. You never know, even with really different people from yourself, the value they can provide later, especially as for entrepreneurs, is they need to know people doing all kinds of functions, and even in different industries they can help. My third piece of advice would be to ask for help. The world is changing so fast, and you're often expected to do a number of things, many of which you won't have any experience in or have learned in any sort of formal way. So find somebody who knows how to do it that can help you, so don't be afraid to ask for help. Probably the most common advice for entrepreneurs is don't be afraid to fail. You learn so much from failure. When we succeed, we don't sort of self-evaluate the different pieces of what led to that success, but when you fail, you really go back and analyze what went wrong, and you remember those lessons. So it is through failure that you learn, you gain experience, and it's a part of an entrepreneurial life. And the last piece I would say is emotional intelligence. And this is something that's gained over time, and that means being a good leader and manager is not just being strong in the work, it's also being strong in the team. So listening to other people, learning how to communicate and influence in a way that builds bonds and connections and trust can really help you in your career.
Thanks, Carrie. And so we hear a lot from the government at both provincial and federal level about how important entrepreneurship is to the Canadian economy. Could you maybe tell us a bit more about that, about why entrepreneurship is thought to be so important?
Well, it's incredibly important. Not only is our economy mainly resource-based, and a lot of manufacturing has left, but even when we had lots of manufacturing, the majority of new jobs are created through small to medium-sized firms. So I think it depends on where you read, but usually they say about 90% of new jobs in Canada are from small to medium-sized firms. So it's kind of within companies' best interest to cut costs, to increase shareholder value. So often they're trying to streamline, but companies that are growing are creating those jobs. So that will help us be able to compete on a global level if we're creating new innovative companies.
Very important. So we've also heard about social entrepreneurship. People talk about that more these days. Can you tell us what that is?
Well, we have probably 20% of our client base here is social innovators or social entrepreneurs. Definitely, they are in business. They're not necessarily nonprofits. They're for-profit organizations that have a triple bottom line. So they have another, as well as making revenue, they also want to impact society in some way. So that might be through the inputs of what they do. So they might hire people that are disadvantaged. It might be through the product that they make that might help some sector of society, or it might be their whole business model is sustainable, uses recycled materials, all these kinds of things. It's a really big space, and it's basically looking at business through a different lens of how can I create a business that creates jobs and it gets revenue so that it can grow, but also do social good at the same time.
Thank you. So if people are interested in working with Mars, getting to know more about your services, how would they do that?
Well, I think through events, signing up for our e-newsletter, they can just see the weekly listing of events. There are a lot that we have here, and encourage them to come out. I think if they're working on building their company, that to apply to the advisory services, there's an online form that they can fill out, and then they get an intake meeting with an advisor. I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. And the final question that I've got for you, Kerry, is one that I ask most people that I interview, and it is, have you any words of advice for the students as they embark on their careers and move out into either the world of work as an entrepreneur or perhaps further study? But based on your experience of the world, what do you think are the most important things for them?
I think it's hard to know what you want to do before you do stuff. So I think the pressure that we put on high school students and even undergrads to know what they're supposed to study and what they're supposed to be after is quite hard. I went through a huge period where I tried a bunch of stuff because I wasn't immediately going to be a doctor or a lawyer, or didn't sort of fit into any of the boxes. So it's okay to try things and see what you like. You can gain a lot of experience and go, you know, I'm good with people, or I'd rather, you know, work on products, or I want to work in the functions. But sometimes if you don't know what that is, if you're not sure, that's okay too. Just try some things out that interest you and learn along the way. Even if you gain skills that you don't want to use, they will help you later.
Great advice, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me today, Kerry. It's going to be this video will be useful to the students inside the course on technical entrepreneurship, and thank you.
Thank you, and enjoy your course.